Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Alien versus Predator Galaxy podcast, the original Alien and Predator podcast. I'm regular host Aaron Percival, aka Corporal Hicks, and joining me as always is
Adam Zeller, aka RidgeTop.
Eric Adams, aka Xenomorphine.
And we're back for a not contemporary, that's the wrong word. Topical discussion, talking about some of the recent releases of Alien. And this one is going to be one of those ones I fucking hate doing. It's going to be an absolute bummer of an episode because we are talking. Well, I assume it's going to be a bummer of an episode because we're going to be talking Arc 2 of Marvel's Alien, aka Alien Revival.
So that's issues 7 through 12.
And Alien Annual number 1. Also heralded as Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. It's LaRocco's last book on Alien.
Yeah, if he wants to come on and give us an interview, we're going to be completely impartial.
We do not want LaRocco on this show. No,
he has copied a lot of things, yeah.
This is true. It could just take some of the audio and rearrange it around to do things. So, okay, I don't think it's going to be that bad. I'm quite ambivalent to it at the minute. So, we'll do brief thoughts. We'll do a brief rundown of the events of the story, and then we'll go into specifics. So, like the first one, I thought it was okay, narratively wise. I'm sure you guys will bring up points that I didn't think about and it will piss me off and make me dislike the comic even more. But as it stands, I generally enjoyed it. I thought it was okay. It did stuff. It didn't do anything new, but what it did was it explored other bits of the franchise that I generally get enjoyment out of. The thing with the disease I like. And it's an element that probably doesn't get played with a lot, really, if you think about it. I think we've only really had Resurrection's novel. It wasn't even in the film. Resurrection's novel played with it. And Alien's Purge played with it. So this is actually a resurgence of an element that hasn't really been used for a long time. I can't remember when Purge was. It must have been like late 90s. So I like the characters. I like Jane. I like the idea of the spinners. But again, it's not really done anything new. There does seem to be a bit of an overarching form, an overarching narrative forming with what Marvel's doing, with what Philip Kennedy Johnson's doing. So we'll see how it goes from there. As always, LaRocco's art is trash. And there's some terrible panels in there, some terribly lazy panels, but also some reasonably good ones. Like I think in issue 1, there's a nice piece of the chest burster that did not look traced and it actually looked decent because I could see it hadn't been traced. And then you get to the awful money shot at the end where it's just figures floating on top of something. So it's about as consistent as it always was. We'll talk about Annual towards the end. But as it stands, I think I'm 5 out of 10, just middle of the ground. It was okay. It wasn't great, but it wasn't trash as an overall package. Adam, how about yourself?
Yeah, so again, I am glad that we'll be having a new artist, if it wasn't very clear. And I guess they're restarting the numbering, so the next one will be Alien 1 again. But I'm kind of with you, Aaron. I think this was fine. It wasn't great. There were elements I really liked about it in terms of the setting was quite interesting, how you had this very rural religious aspect about it, but you also had these incredible vistas of these atmosphere processors with like these little wooden barns and stuff in the foreground. And that sort of imagery was cool, seeing a bit more of a dynamic alien world that looked very different to our own was interesting. The religious aspect, almost kind of like Amish, I guess, it kind of reminded me of the vibe of this video game I really enjoyed, Far Cry 5. And that had a cult in it called The Path at Eden's Gate. And it very much reminded me of that a bit with the vibe of the religious aspect. But overall, the story, yeah, it was interesting. The art takes me out of it, but I agree with you, Aaron. There's a few panels where it's like, okay, that was pretty good. Like the alien looks pretty good here. And then you flip over to the next one and it's like, okay, now it looks terrible. So deadlines, I guess. But there were a few where I was like, huh, yeah, that one's pretty good. So it is a bit jarring when you see panels and the aliens look so lazily done, and then right next to it you see some that look pretty strong. So it's just a shame this was how the aliens comics started, with something so average at best. But yeah, for me, it just, I think there were also some points where it tried to be kind of like, okay, when you're dealing with things that are horrifying or like effed up, it's a fine line between having something that's genuinely like horrifying and interesting and something that just seems kind of edgelordy and like it's trying too hard, like, oh wow, isn't this messed up, guys? And there were a few moments in this, just like the first arc, where it's like, I can see you're trying to be horrifying, but you're just making me laugh, kind of things. So yeah, it had its weaknesses. If you're an Alien fan, it's worth a read, I guess. That's my highest recommendation. I'd probably go with a 5 as well, Aaron. Maybe even a 4 for me, honestly. I'd probably say a 4.
See, then it's not worth a read if it's 4, because that's not quite good enough for anything.
Yeah. All right, whatever. I'll be nice. I'll go to 5.
You are allowed to not like it and not recommend it.
It's just I'm so like about it. Like, I think after my intense dislike of the first arc, I'm just kind of at this one. I'm like, yeah, it's more of this. I have the same problems with it,
I think Adam just wants to mark it out of 10.
Out of 10.
Yeah.
Out of 10.
Is it just burnt out now? Like, yes, I've said the same thing for the last
Yeah,
year,
because a
and
lot
it's
of the
just
same
more of
issues I had with arc 1 are the exact same issues here, even narrative wise. Like, I'm still happy to see Philip Kennedy Johnson continue to write the series for a bit. It'll be especially interesting to see him work with a new artist, because he does have some really interesting ideas. I like what he does with the corporate espionage and corporate like conflict kind of stuff. And that was an interesting aspect of this, with the whole subterfuge between the United Americas and Weyland-Yutani. But especially when it comes to things being disturbing, and I don't know how much of that is just lost in translation between what Philip Kennedy Johnson is writing and what LaRocca is depicting, but it's almost like the shower scene in Covenant, right? Where we saw the trailer and it was like, oh, this could be like a really cool, disturbing like Lambert moment, and then we see the movie and it's like, oh, that was the slasher movie garbage people were worried about. And there's a couple scenes in this that it's the same kind of thing. I think there's a way to do gore and terror and even disturbing elements in a way that it's done right. But again, that's personal preference. You could be all for that, and like, I guess it depends on the context too. Because again, I like AVPR, and that has plenty of exploitative, gory bullshit in it. So,
that is literally what I was just thinking, because it's like you appreciate that body schlock, I guess, kind of horror. So it's like, and you're not liking it here? Is this just the LaRocca hate?
Is Alien supposed to be like higher tier than AVP though? Like in terms of how it's done?
Well, of course, it's supposed to be more high art. But I mean, like thinking about comparing it to the likes of Labyrinth and how that depicts the kind of disturbing imagery and the body horror of what Church was doing to everybody and the experiences in the hive. That feels disturbing. It doesn't feel schlocky when compared to this.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree with you there. And it's interesting because we just did a very positive, very glowing review on Salvation and Sacrifice. Also comics that had a very religious element about them.
Before we dive too far, me and you were
right. Okay, yeah. Eric, your turn. Initial thoughts. What did you think?
I'd agree in terms of the artwork. It is an improvement marginally. I think a favorable way to describe Roka's style would be stylized emulation. There are some panels where when he's doing stuff, or at least from what I can see, when he's being original, he's very good. He's on the money. But there are those moments where it is blatant copying. So that is going to be a thing with this artist on whatever property he works on. In terms of the story, my view on it is similar to Covenant. With Covenant, I liked it up until David 8 shows up. At that point, it starts to fall apart and have more of the issues for me. In this part, I kind of was liking this up to, because it felt like a cross between Alien 3 and the first of the AVP comics, because you had that similar plot elements at play. And I liked it up until where it changed from a nice little self-contained survival story, and then they switched it up and they tried to make it this big sort of orchestrated Machiavellian plot. That's where it started to feel a bit more generic. It stumbled over itself, and I was just thinking, no, I just want to see a survival story. Just give me that and give us the horror element. There are some points where things happen that it's a little bit, why did that happen? It's never explained. Like, for instance, there is a scene where there's someone who's cocooned. They've got an unopened egg by them. They can't move. And, action happens. And an alien, it can attack all the people that have, caused the ruckus. And what does it do? It turns to the person who's cocooned, waiting to be face hugged, and it kills them. Why?
I noticed that
did not make
part.
any sense.
They're fully cocooned and it just head bites them, and I was like,
and it just
what?
turns around to the one part, and there are several scenes like that. Like, there's a great, it was actually gearing up to be a great scene. I thought, oh, I like this part where because it deals with these Alien 3-like issues of an Amish community, and some of them just don't agree ideologically with the ones who've left. So they are all holding hands and they're doing these hymns, and the aliens are coming in behind them. And it could have been such a great
That's one of the parts I was
moment.
talking about.
Yeah, like you could have seen them all getting abducted like Apone did, and you could have seen these arms going like that out into the shadows, all that. And what you actually get is the scene like in Resurrection, where it goes into the escape pod and it's just blood. And you're thinking, but these aliens know they've got eggs. They need the people to procreate. They need to abduct them, but they're just doing generic. And it loses the value it could have. So
yeah, that's a problem.
There are points in it. Yeah, it becomes a bit too Alien 3-ish at that point. But the story as a whole, as I say, I liked it up to the point where they tried to turn it into this Machiavellian scheme. And at that point, it just got, no, Dave, you're tripping up over yourself. Just keep it a nice little self-contained survival story. But at that point, that's when it falls down for me. Up until that moment, there were some interesting things. And I wish it had taken the ball and run with it. Because as Aaron says, this doesn't really do anything new. You've had this same plot device in the Dark Horse comics, like the story, which is literally called Alien, which it deals with literally a tribal alien species, and there's a ship which crashes and it brings the alien to its planet. I think the one where you had aliens versus Vikings, I think that was an alien ship that crashed or something. My memory's a bit hazy on that. But
I think that was a Tall Tale, the Viking one.
Oh, okay. But you go back to the original film. It's a derelict spacecraft. It's the space drug. It's crashed on the planet. It's always something from the outside world bringing it into the character's world. It's not new, but it could have been interesting. But it's when they mix it up with all the corporate politics and this whole thing about the synthetics who wanting to be their own thing, but in actual fact they're working with these company agents, and you just think, I don't need this in my story.
I don't think the synthetic thing was really.
It didn't feel thoughtful.
Well, I mean, in this, it's not. It didn't feel really connected to that sort of thing that the first arc was introducing.
I mean, there was
that
because
was
you
the
had
vibe I
that.
got.
You had that. Where is it? I've written this quote that you have literally a synthetic getting really emotional, and it's it's clearly a callback to David 8 and Shaw, because they're carrying around this synthetic as character who's revealed to be a synthetic. They're carrying around its head to give them information, and there's a synthetic that finds the head, and they go, "Look at this! They're collecting fucking synth trophies. Are they actual cavemen?" And you're thinking, "What? Ash wouldn't care. Bishop wouldn't care." It feels like they use synths, but they're making them go crazy and emotional. I'm just thinking, just make them human characters. There's no need to. And it felt like they were bringing that whole synthetic colony who want to be synths and they hate humans subplot from the first arc. They were kind of bringing it into. That's how I felt. It felt like it was connected on that level, but it's, as I said, I just didn't want any of that to be there. It could have been better it could have been a lesson of less is more, but they added to the pudding, and it just felt like blah, like
I don't
Covenant
think
did. It felt
I don't think you're really going to be satisfied with any of this stuff then, because it does feel like they are forming more of an overarching narrative with this.
Yeah, I don't mind that, but when
And the synthetic stuff's going to be a big part of it because Volume 3 is all around it.
Yeah, which is fine. But as you said, when you're having these really awfully emotional synthetic, and you're doing things that just make the final product go, it could have been better without it. And that's how I felt with this. I liked it up to the point where it got like that, and then it was Machiavellian, and I just thought, no, make it like Hadley's Hope, where it's a tragic accident. Keep it like, because the Alien seems to work best when things are tragic accidents. Nobody orchestrates them. They're just, it happened, shit hits the fan. The alien is the ultimate opportunist. They call it perfect organism, but is the ultimate parasitical opportunist, and it will take advantage of tragedy. And here it's no. So that's when it felt up. But as a whole, as the story, I did like the comic better than the first one, but it was still not up there as one of my favorite. It's an improvement, but it's one of those things where that's not necessarily saying much. But it does have its high points.
What would you score it?
5, 6 out of 10.
So we're all sitting about the same level of.
Yeah, I don't hate
ambivalence.
it. That's the thing. I don't hate it. I'm just saying that's the point where it fell down. But it's got some good stuff in there, but there's also some stuff that doesn't make sense and blah blah blah. So I just have to be honest and acknowledge that. That's all.
That's fair. That's fair. I was going to do a run through of this, but I kind of want to hear people's opinions. Are you listening to this having read the book and knowing after the fact, or do people want us to do a run through? A brief, quick run through of the events of the stories that we're going to be talking about. I don't want to do it for this one, generally mostly because of that ambivalence. But if you have an opinion on that, please do reach out and let us know as to whether that's something you'd be interested in, or you've already read it and you know and you don't really care.
Yeah, that's something I've wondered about as well, because I do feel like most people that tune into the book or comic podcast have probably read them. But even if you've read them, I don't know, is it nice if we just do like a refresher as to here's the basic events of the story? Or would you rather we just dive into open discussion?
Or would you like us to do a drunk histories thing where we get drunk and we try to do synopsis of Alien comics? We could do that.
Yeah,
that sounds like
There'd be a draw for that.
Sounds like a different feature in itself, but
yeah, let's do it.
So where should we start with Alien Revival then? What element do we want to talk about first? What did we feel most passionate about?
Okay, I'll say what I like the most. Okay, and it's unfortunate because it's the same thing I like the most about the first arc, and that's the covers. The covers are are awesome. I like a lot of the imagery again with the alien and the cornfield. Like, it feels almost kind of Halloweeny, you know, like, and it's not a setting we typically associate with the Xenomorph. So a lot of the covers were just really striking, with the alien on the windmill in particular, and seeing it in this very rural setting.
And the Queen cover as well.
Which one was that?
the Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh, right. You didn't mean Queen
I
Alien.
thought you
meant
meant
Queen
Alien
the
Oh,
Queen.
Artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. That was a take on that. And
Random
as well
as, but it works.
yeah, and the variants too. Some of the variants were really good, honestly.
Who's the
So-
artist for the covers?
Is it not Guru-efx? No, it's not. Is it?
No,
They're
he's
different to
colorist.
LaRocca didn't do any of the covers.
He might have done a variant one. He did the cover for Annual, which we'll talk about after this. But
Yes.
no, he didn't do any of the main.
Okay.
He didn't do
Mark
any-
Aspinall.
Yeah. So Mark Aspinall, you killed it. Awesome. You're one of the best parts of this comic. Congratulations.
And he's obviously Team Skull.
Oh right, yeah, because the skull under the yeah.
It's in pretty much every single one of the covers. So respect from me for that.
Yeah.
To be fair, I think he did a good job with the covers in terms of conveying that sort of Midwestern feeling to the story. You know, you were talking about like the Amish sort of vibe to it, but I think it feels very corn-fed kind of feel to the vibe of the series. You know, kind of like the Eric Red kind of vibe of farms in space, and I think Aspinall did a good job of conveying that sensation through those covers. Pretty much all of them. You know, like the random one with the chicken in it and stuff like that.
Yeah, there are no chicken bursters in case people were wondering. I know.
Oh, there's something weirder.
There is,
Something
yeah, there is
weirder, but-
something from a non-human host, but not people going chicken bursters. Yes,
But that was a
no.
great cover. Seeing the facehugger in the chicken coop, like
Mhm.
yeah. So
Oh,
again,
yeah, it
and
was
the
all about
variants too.
eggs. Yeah.
Like I was just on Marvel's website looking at the different variant covers, and some of them are just phenomenal. And so I'm like, can we get artwork that is at least close to this good? I know the covers are like the showcase pieces, but can we get some artwork? Well, we have new artists, so and I did look at their work, and it does seem like it will be superior, at least better for me personally.
And that's
and we've-
Julius Ota.
Yeah, and we've gotten a first look at the Predator artwork as well. I know this is an Alien podcast, but I'll briefly touch on it. And it looks good. It looks a little stylized, kind of reminds me of Predator Hunters, but you know, it didn't turn me off. I'm for it. So
It didn't look like Photoshop from what we'd seen, so that is an instant boost up.
but I didn't identify as much lifted elements in this arc, Eric. So I think you're right about that. But someone did note that one of the ships at the end of the second arc was taken from Star Citizen, the game. Who I think that might have been Christian.
Yes.
Was it? I'm not sure, but
Or it was
yeah.
probably engineer on the board.
Oh, right. Yeah. But yeah, so I guess don't tell Star Citizen Company about
Chris
I mean,
Roberts.
Chris Roberts'
yeah.
company. Yeah.
I mean, there was still lots of. It's the same issues we had with Arc 1. You know, there are very obvious layered over figure photos that don't look connected to the scene. You know, and that's when it's at its most distracting. I mean, at the very end of issue 1, you know, the last page is what's supposed to be this glorious money shot of the alien and a newly hatched chest burster looking down over the church top, and it's this awful panel where it just looks like they're both floating. You know, they're both floating.
It's
but then
perspective issues, yeah.
And then you have this lovely panel here, the second panel, where it's nice and minimal and it looks good. So
yeah, that happens with some of the action
throughout.
scenes, because you have these great build-ups and you're going to see the aliens attack, and then it's clearly these very sort of stiff action figures where the torso, there's no bending in the torso because it's literally a solid piece. All the articulations in the arms, and he just traced over it, and it looks like the aliens are literally just. To tell you what it looks like. It looks like the scene we always criticize when we say, is there any flaw with Alien? I mean, everyone always says it's the part where the alien's floating outside the Narcissus because it looks really stiff. That's what these look like. and they're meant to be doing these dynamic poses where they're
Yeah.
jumping and leaping, and because of that, it's harmed itself, and that's the tragedy of it, because it could have been on there. It was you could tell it was written for the artist to go, do your stuff, do your thing, and then he's gone, oh, yeah, okay, Photoshop.
Yeah, there's some really interesting set pieces in this that is again just
this one was good. Like that was all right with the aliens, I think. But then you go to like the very next page.
So that's issue 3, 2.
Yeah. Well, right before that, you have this infamous one, which is just terrible.
Yeah, that's one of the ones I was...
So that just looks like layered over. It looks like literal layers. There's the background layer, and then there's the next layer, and it just doesn't look connected. It doesn't look part of the same visual, because that's clearly
well, someone's got a toy. They've got a toy, and they've set a camera up to do when there's movement, capture it, and they've just thrown the toy in midair.
Yeah. And this is the next page I was talking about. Like that looks like a toy. That looks like a toy. It does not look good. But on the very previous page, you have this, which I'd say is pretty strong. Does the job, It's not immediately identifiable as a toy. So.
There's a great shot of a close-up of the alien's face, where I think it's the first attack, but it's just this close-up sort of, it's slightly at an angle, and you see all the intricate tubing. It looks, I don't know if it's been traced, because it could have been, but that was a really good shot of an alien. I really love that shot. It just looked like it's got all that photorealistic detail, but then there are these other ones, and it upsets the vibe, man.
It's the stuff that's not the alien in general that I think looks good. So there's like, Eric, you were alluding to the cocooned lady earlier that got head bit for no reason. That reveal of her cocooned to the greenery where, the forestry where she is, with the legs bitten off and the resin covering half her face as she's blind. That looked fantastic. And like the new aliens, the I call them Grubers, tubers, they look fine. They look, genuinely good and dynamic in their movement, because he's not tracing something. There is no tuber alien thing for him to trace. He's doing original stuff. So when LaRocco's actually doing something new, it looks good, but it's just so inconsistent, and that inconsistency is part of the.
Well, I will say that there is a slightly other problem there. I noticed with a lot of the human figures, you've got this weird thing of sometimes they're having a normal conversation, but the facial reactions are really like extreme.
Yeah.
And you think, what, like they're saying, "Oh, would you like a cup of tea?" And the other person's going, "Cup of tea."
It's the same issue with Land. Yeah, the facial expressions can look very strange at times. Also, the perspective, like where the floor meets the background and stuff, it just isn't right perspective if you're trying to do perspective accurately. But some of my favorite panels were the ones like this, where you have you get to see the planets in the sky, and you see the processor in the background, and this old like mine in front of it. Like
it really gives it a sense of scale and world as well.
There's another one where they're just driving in the all-terrain vehicle after they've escaped from the mines. And you also see, there's just a lot of beautiful vista shots in this. I can see if I can pull it up here for
landscapes are
anyone who's
where
watching.
a lot of this does stand out, a lot of the landscape stuff. Although, in fairness, it's possible he might have got just a landscape trace. We don't know. But we will say they do look really nice.
Yeah. What did everybody think of the main character in this one, then? What did people think of Jane?
She hadn't. See, this is another callback to Alien 3. Like Ripley had the, again, a chest burster inside, where this character does it as well. You have this thing where she says at the start, she eventually does. She's face hugged.
Yeah, it doesn't take.
It's there. It does it in record time, and it falls off.
No. The idea is that it didn't finish through on it because of the disease.
I don't know. To me, it looked like it did.
Oh,
There's
no,
nothing there that says it doesn't.
That's not.
But anyway, it's she's got this disease, and she says, "Oh, I'm wasting away. All my nerve endings have gone, blah, blah, blah." And that's interesting. Like, Ripley has that similar sort of plot device, and she's dying. But people were pointing out in some comment sections, it's weird. She has this disease, but as she goes on, she's basically just becoming Machiko. She's doing all these awesome sort of Katniss bow and arrow shots and all the rest of it. She's having no trouble, where it could have played into the story a bit more. And it's like it only has that moral dilemma for her at the start of the story, and it's as though they just forget about it. It doesn't really lead to anything anyway. They even say, she talks to the one character who's later got this big reveal, but he's a priest or something, and she says, "Oh, who did you tell about my, this wasting disease?" And he says, "Well, they're not blind. You're literally, every time you stand up, you're wincing, you're coughing. Everyone can see you've got this wasting disease. Everybody realizes it. And I haven't told anyone." And yet she's doing a lot of these action sequences without any. There's no equivalent of like Ripley in Alien 3 when she's having the Queen chest burst, and it gets to the point where she's literally sort of like doubling over, and she's running out of breath. She's having all these moments. It could have been interesting because you could have had a moment where she could have saved herself, but she gets winded or something like that, and nothing like that happens. And it's one of those moments where it could have capitalized. It sets something up really interesting they could have capitalized on, but it doesn't capitalize on it.
I would agree with you in the sense that it's not there a lot, but I think it's there more than you think it is. There's bits in the hive where she's stumbling over and falling over because of what's happening to her. There's bits where they're walking through the forest and stuff like that where she's stumbling. It doesn't have a massive impact as such, but it's there. And the stuff in the hive forces a different character to get killed, and because she then becomes the target. And just to the chest burster point, at the very end of the last issue, one of the assets has a rare disease that makes her unfit for implantation. Organism would not engage.
Oh, okay. Well, then I have to ask, why in that case did it not just do like we saw in Aliens? It couldn't implant her, and yet it died. Why did it die?
Because
it could have just gone off and
it didn't deliver the payload.
Yeah, but it could have just still lived like in Aliens. It was interrupted for an embryo implantation, so they put it in the stasis tube and it stayed that way for weeks.
It gets killed.
No,
does.
The ones in the stasis tube, they've been like that for a long while in Aliens.
The one that tried to attack her gets killed.
But it falls off, and it's not getting out of the way. It should be sort of moving out everywhere. It should be. It's not doing that. It's just like
it's trying to.
It looks dead to me. I could be wrong, but it looks dead.
That's just Laroca's art.
Well, in that case, that's a fatal flaw of the artwork, because to me it looked like she'd been impregnated in record to like Covenant time, because I thought that was a weird callback to Covenant. Looks like it's impregnated her. She doesn't chest burst, and it just looks like it's dead when it should be still running around.
See, that is not the reading at all.
Yeah, well, that's my interpretation then.
I think that
it genuinely looked that way to me.
It's just Laroca's poor artwork, so it's sort of
that's where it's harmed.
It's sort of like it's sat on the bed, and then she blows it away. But yeah, that's just Laroca's artwork. I figured all this from this issue. At the moment it happened, I was like, right, she's going to be immune. It's going to be like the leprosy or the thyroid issue from Resurrection or Purge, and it's just going to be an immunity.
They could have used that as a plot point, like they used Ripley in Alien 3. Ripley is the one who it doesn't want to hurt. So they could have used that. She could have twigged, oh, they're not doing their thing to me. They could have used that as some sort of escape plan, but it doesn't.
I think it's going to play into it. This all feels like very much a slow burn to a larger narrative. Like when I was first reading this arc, the early issues as we're reading it issue by issue, it's like, oh, so this isn't connected to whatever the first one was called. I can't remember. Arc 1 at all, but then it turns out it is. Bloodlines. But it turns out it is. This is Weyland-Yutani field testing their aliens. It's the exact same ones from Thing. And then in this, you get this information going back to a different station. I think it's Epsilon Station, they say. And it all just feels like it's a very slow burn into whatever sort of longer narrative that Philip Kennedy Johnson's trying to run here. So as it stands, it feels like nothing's really happening, but like this was 6 issues just for them to know that there's a disease that stunts the aliens.
And I didn't really comment on Jane, so I'll say as well that I liked her as a character. I thought she was an interesting, dynamic character, and how she had this personal choice of being the leader of this colony or abandoning them and going back to Earth to have her disease potentially treated. But that could have destroyed the contract she had, and it would have negatively affected the people she was leading. So that was an interesting dynamic with her, how she wasn't even fully kind of a believer of this religion. And then with her friend Ambrose, who ended up being a Weyland-Yutani synth plant, it goes from a very friendly relationship to a hostile yet still kind of relying on each other relationship. And that was interesting as well, seeing her carry the head around the whole time in her bag and them talking to each other. I thought that was done pretty well, actually.
I
And
noticed it did Aaron's favorite unfilmed sequence from the Prometheus script in there,
With holding her down
for the face.
Yeah.
I felt that was deliberate. Like when you were talking about holding the head and the callbacks to Prometheus, I felt that was deliberate, doing the unfilmed scene.
Mm-hmm.
And it also leaves the character open for the future, because unlike Gabrielle Cruz, she survives. So, and there's something of value she has that the company is interested in. So,
Although she's supposedly dying pretty soon, so who knows?
well, they did say she could be treated, so it makes you wonder if she's
Yeah,
past
true.
the point of being treated, or if it was just kind of coming up on that borderline. I guess if they bring her back, we'll see.
See, this is one of the things I do like about these being 6-issue runs. You know, I enjoyed actually getting to spend that extended time with her early on. You know, this whole, I could have gone back and been treated, and I was tempted to go back and do it. You know, it kind of speaks towards a lot of the, maybe not crisis of faith stuff from the last episode, you know, when we talk about salvation and sacrifice, but conviction, I guess. You know, at what point personal, what's the word I'm looking for? Her own well-being, you know, conflicts with what she feels of her responsibility to the others, and I liked getting that time and that reflection with her. And then even towards the end, when, you know, she's questioning, was this entire, it sort of gets towards that crisis of faith thing again, but you know, at the end it was like, is this manufactured? Is this a fake religion that you've had some hand in? And I like that the book doesn't answer that question, but the question's there in her head. You know, I think it's become pretty obvious. I like that kind of thing. I like the self-doubt and the how far will you go for your own convictions? How far will you go for your own well-being? I like to see that sort of stuff explored. So that was something I did actually quite like about Jane in here, and that she actually stuck it out to her own detriment for the well-being of her flock, so to speak. And as far as she was concerned, you know, when we met her, once that deal was signed, she was going to fuck off and die somewhere. She was just going to go off on her own and let nature take her. And I like that. I like that strength of character that we see from her early on, regardless of the disease's effectiveness within the plot, you know, as it goes on. But just purely from that character point of view, I did really like her.
And even just the physical fact of her dealing with this pain and this disease, but still being a hell of a fighter, like with her bow and everything. That, I mean, you couldn't help but admire her as a character for, like you said, Aaron, being selfless, but also in the face of dealing with pain, still fighting to the end.
The head thing. Did you see the Ambrose stuff coming? I know I'm a fucker for not seeing these secret synthetics coming up. But did you see Ambrose?
Once it got to the scene with the eggs in there and he approached her and he's like, I told you to stay out of this,
Yeah.
yeah. But before that, I actually didn't. It seemed like they were genuine friends, and it was kind of surprising.
How about you, Eric? Was that signposted a mile for you, or?
No, I thought he was human, because I didn't see much point in making that character synthetic. So I mean, the reveal worked for me, but I don't know. The same sort of thing could have been equally done with a human character. There could just be a human
I don't think
operative doing that.
I don't think the walking around with a head in your bag thing would work with a human character, though.
No, that wouldn't. But you could have had like some sort of clue, like their mission statement or something. They could have found it on the body or something along those. So, I mean, yeah, it worked. But yeah, it just felt like it was a little too on the nose as a David's head and Shaw sort of analogy callback thing.
It's something we've seen before in the comics, like Dust to Dust.
I don't think it's strictly David's head, but I mean, it's funny because that was one of the first things I said to Alex White when they brought us into the fold. They brought us into the fold into Charybdis. So whatever you do, please do not just have an android's head knocking around in somebody's bag, please, because it's done to death. I think that's ultimately where I'm so ambivalent with the comic as well, is because nothing feels. It's all build up to this narrative, but it's all stuff that I've seen elsewhere. You know, I've seen it in 1,000 other comics, and it's not really entertaining me terribly much at the minute. And the new stuff, I can't figure out what Philip Kennedy Johnson's trying to do for a start. It's the same thing with the Alpha in the first arc, you know, in Bloodlines, and we were all sort of trying to figure out why it was a goat alien and why everything that was supposedly derived from it was a normal alien. And then in this, you end up with these random ass tuber aliens that, I mean, I know we were talking about it off camera, but I don't feel like that would have realistically been face hooked, because it's just a little snaky thing. And then it's behaving in this weird random way where it decides to go down people's throats.
It goes full Hammerpede.
I thought that was a Hammerpede callback, but yeah.
But it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be an alien.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be related to the alien, and then you have one
horrifying.
of the.
It's crawling
you have
down
one
the
of the
throat,
adults.
so it's horrifying.
You have one of the adult aliens sort of holding the mouth open, which I think would have been fucking brilliant if it was like, you know, facehugger related and holding down the human or turning his face, sort of like the caresses if you get in the trophy kills in AVP 2010. You know, when you get the harvest kills and you hold the colonists down and the facehugger crawls up and it does its thing and it's sort of like holding, caressing the face. But no, the way the tubers were acting, I was like, but why?
Well, you did see this bloated human in the hive, so, and I think one jumped out of him, so it makes you wonder if they like breathe.
Again, I think that was
something like
I think that was like the Prometheus thing where they went up to was it not Fifield? It was Milburn's corpse, and one came out of it. I think that was a similar thing.
But why?
It's why exactly? Why do it? But I think that was the purpose of why they put it in there. They were just going, well, it happened in Prometheus, so
I don't understand how it works. I think, you know, and that's the same thing we had with the original and the goat alien. That's like, why is the Alpha this goat alien when it came from a human host? So I don't know. It sort of feels like either we're really early on in some narrative where it's all going to make sense, because they make a point of calling out the alien things in this. What do they call them? You know, we see these Weyland-Yutani scientists.
Dogs of Perdition.
No, the scientists call them something. What is it? Have you found hosts for the arthropod hybrids yet?
They're talking about the tuber aliens, because they say the human ones, because they're making a distinction. But
so are we just early on and we don't know what the deal is yet, and it still feels kind of, but why? And we're judging it based on that, or is it just a throwaway
we can
thing?
judge it by? But I mean, I think part of it is the writer is basically going, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which is a viable viewpoint. If you're going to do a survival story, it was like I was saying earlier, do a survival story. You don't have to make it new if you don't want to, but make it good. And if you're making it feel a little generic, then there's more reason to throw some new stuff in there. But it's like I was saying earlier, with it just turning into this completely cocooned thing with an unopened egg, and it kills her.
Yeah,
It doesn't
it
kill
makes
the.
no sense.
There's just some weird stuff going on here.
I hate it
there's
when the aliens are shown just arbitrarily killing. It's like,
Yes.
show me some violence in terms of helping you propagate. You know, break some arms so that they can't run away. Break some arms. So, well, I mean, like the alien, that particular host has her legs bitten off. You know, that is aggressive. That is violent. That is brutal. But then why are we killing her?
We'll just make it
what?
disturbing, yeah.
Yeah,
But I mean,
so
it doesn't. It's not just the alien. Like the whole thing, this goes to the root of. There's this colony of like space Amish people, and they call it. I forget what the place is called. Eurysades, I think. The planet. But
Eurydice?
they've handed it over to them, but they later the android head said, well, we found it objectionable it was handed over to you. And it is meant to be this thing about, oh well, they operated the terraforming process of things, but in Aliens, Burke literally says completely automated. So they weren't any need to have people operating the machinery there in the first place. But I get it as a plot point. They wanted to just have space farms and just have the visuals there, because it makes like a nice visual contrast, aliens with medieval stuff. But you know, you ask yourself, why were they even there? Why were they getting an entire planet to themselves as opposed to just like a portion of a continent or something? There is no reason. It gives us a grounding for her subplot with the disease to stay there, blah blah blah. But when you ask yourself, well, why are they even there? Then you go, that there was no reason. So you get these logic flaws cropping up every so often.
I did get a chuckle out of the prospect of a lever to turn the atmosphere.
Yeah, just the big
on
handle with the red ball on it. I'm like, are you serious? Yeah, I didn't.
That made me chuckle. I mean, I see where you're coming from, Eric. Entirely.
And I mean, there's also another point. I thought when the ship crashed and you saw it, there were lots of eggs, and she even saw fully grown aliens. I thought, oh shit, you're gonna see them invading farm animals and all stuff. And yet you get to the next section, and they're having this thing like in Alien 3 where nobody believes her. And they literally say, we searched the wreckage after the fires went out. There was nothing on that ship but dead people. And I'm thinking, why didn't you run into the eggs? Why didn't you Why didn't you get immediately abducted? And you just weren't. And it's one of these things where the comic sets itself up to these things, and you go, oh shit, they're on now, but nothing happened, or it goes in a weird direction.
It was just for the purpose of little narrative drama.
Yeah.
But I will give some more praise to LaRocca, surprisingly. Like, again, going back to these, like, panels like this.
Yeah.
Explain for the audio listeners.
So this is a panel that's, again, another vista where we can see a little, it looks like a kind of refinery and industrial setting, and then this atmosphere processor towering over in the background, with our characters arriving at another one of the settlements because theirs was overrun with aliens. And so they're going through, on their way to that, this like golden wheat field.
I was going to say wheat, like, another Covenant callback prequel.
Right. And
it's wheat.
This bright orange sunset, but it also kind of reminds me of like Vincent Ward's Alien 3, right? Because in the following scene, you have the aliens attacking them through the wheat fields. And
as he's coming up on prey.
Right. And beyond that, there was also the sense that they didn't like technology, but they had to rely on it. So that was another kind of connection to Vincent Ward's Alien 3 for me. So I did see those elements and the religious aspect as well. So there were things in this comic that, like, yeah, that's interesting. Like, you could have taken this somewhere more, you know, and even visual elements that LaRocca did where I was like, that's very impressive. I like seeing these huge planets in the sky because this is a moon. And like, we got a little bit in the movie Predators. And I think that's something that is really cool to see, especially on an alien planet, is these massive other bodies in the sky sometimes. I mean, not all the time, because you don't want to overdo it. You still want it to be like grounded sci-fi, but on occasion, having those more awe-inspiring sci-fi elements can be a benefit, I think.
Well, even just a reminder.
Yeah,
that
I
we're
think
on another
this,
planet. Yeah.
what you just described, a lot of that is down to this really gorgeous coloring. But the coloring in this
Laroka's lucky
arc
he's
is
had guru-efx working on this one in the last arc with him.
like when you say about the planets and you actually see them, there's that nice sort of melting into the atmosphere vibe in it. Like, as you said, like happened in Predators, you saw that in live action, but you really get it in here. You have a lot of these landscapes and the coloring they do, it's amazing. The only thing I wish they would have actually done more of on this, it'd have been really neat to see all the farmland. It would have been like sunlight before tragedy happens, and then it would be nice to see that same kind of lighting with rainwater happening all over this jungle planet and the farmland. I can't remember the last time we saw jungle in a recent Alien. I know we did in Sacrifice, we were recently talking about it, but I think it's been a long time since we've seen jungle environment.
Well, there's also the scene where they're hunting the deer in the beginning, and it's very Avatar looking, the planet. It's like they have these crazy trees with colorful flowers and stuff, and but it doesn't really maintain that through the story. It's only in that initial scene where the planet looks more exceptionally alien-esque, and then it kind of pulls back from that.
We had some jungle in Resistance, is the last time I remember it.
Yeah.
But that's about it. But no, I mean the traveling across different environments was interesting in this, especially as a way to show them moving, away from their home, away from their terraforming station. Was nicely done, I thought. But you know me, I'm always interested in seeing hived up forest and stuff like that. I'm waiting for it to be done on a bigger scale and a more substantial scale. But that's kind of why I like that initial scene with the woman with the legs bitten off and stuff like that, because it was set within that.
Well, I liked the visual where it's, I don't know if it's like some trees that have been pulled back, but the entrance to the hive,
it was like
where it was actually within the environment. They weren't just like typically you just see them in a basement or on a spaceship. You actually see them using a natural environment.
Yeah, they had like burrowed in the ground there. That was cool.
Yeah,
it was
that
like
was
kind of
nice.
Sleepy Hollow-esque. Like I thought that was cool.
Anything left to say on this one, or should we go to the annual?
Yeah, it's just I'm curious as once we restart here and have Alien 1 again, if Philip Kennedy Johnson's going to continue with elements of this story, because like you've been saying, Aaron, it seems like he's been building something. But if they're restarting the number, if he's working with a new artist, you have to wonder.
It won't. I won't worry about it. This is a Marvel thing. They restart the numbers quite often. I don't know what's up with my camera today. They restart the numbers quite a lot, but it's just another volume. So like we've had volume 1 and 2, this is just going to be volume 3 of Alien, even though it's Alien 1.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it seems to be a continuation of what we know of the other ones anyway, because I think it's going to be focused on the synthetic movement that what was her name? The woman at the female synthetic at the end of the first arc. It seems to be like an android freedom kind of thing that's going to be in volume 3.
Yeah.
Also, comes out paperback under Revival.
Probably
August
by the time
24th.
this is out. Oh, okay, they've put that back then. So yeah, that should hopefully be after this episode's up.
So if for some reason you haven't read it yet and want to read it after listening to this, there you go. But I'll get it on the completionist, whatever.
Yeah, same.
I bought Resistance, so
we said in the last episode we're part of the problem.
Yeah, I think we've said like out of 10 review scores, but I think that a better way to just give a yes or a no to a story is just basically like with a film, how much rewatch value has this got? Do you think you will go back and reread this, or are you fine with just you've read it, you're not bothered with ever going through it again?
It depends, because like I said, it feels like this is early this is why I never liked doing reviews of individual issues, because I didn't have a complete picture, and it feels like this is very much the same, where I don't have a complete picture, and it's also not quite functioning as its own thing, because the things that are sticking out things I dislike about it. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it's my impatience or unfairness towards the way the narrative's unfolding, my impatience towards it or not. But like as it stands, I don't really desire rereading them. Maybe
No.
that'll change as there's things introduced in like another arc 3 or arc 4 where it makes me think of something from one of these earlier issues, and I go back and I reread it, and maybe I have a further appreciation for what little elements or little details in there that then become more significant or more interesting because of what it's doing later on down the line. I can't say yet. I would hope so, but as it stands, not really. I mean,
no
I think
reread.
yeah, it's like I said at the start of it. I'm just so ambivalent about these Marvel Alien comics at the minute. I have more fun. I have more fun with the standalones. I have more fun with Annual 1 and Aftermath, even though they're still not really great.
Yeah, see, and that's what I've been missing really with the Marvel stuff is I want those more self-contained stories that we saw with Dark Horse, and I think you can do that in tandem with the more interconnected stuff. Dark Horse did it; they did both. They had their self-contained and they had their big events that would cross over and stuff. So I think there's room for both. I think there's an appetite for both. And I do appreciate that this arc differentiated itself significantly from the first. It was a new group of characters, it was a new planet. There were a few tie-in elements, but it wasn't anything significant. So it did feel like we were getting a new story here, and I did appreciate that. But I would like to see like things with a totally different creative team, different writer, different artists,
just complete stories as well. Just
yeah,
like
that
give
feel
me
like they're over. Yeah.
Yes, give me a 6. I do think 6 issues is a good number because I do think it means they don't have to
Yeah.
rush through things.
It was a
So
good one.
that give me a 6-issue thing that feels complete. These do not feel complete. So
On to the next one.
on to Annual number 1.
And this one is called Aliens, right? Not
No,
Alien.
No,
This
still
is Alien? Okay, so the only Aliens comic we've had from Marvel is the one they did with Vasquez's nephew, which was called what again?
Aftermath.
Aftermath. That's right. So that was their first one-shot, and this is their second.
Although this one's under the Alien line because it also fits into the narrative from Bloodlines, kind of, a little bit. It kind of makes me wonder why that, without going back and rereading Bloodlines, kind of makes me wonder why why LaRocco stuck it out so
Well,
much.
it looks like LaRocca.
Because it is LaRocca's like this.
Well, why he stuck with the company after all that
Yeah.
crazy stuff. Yeah, because it seemed like he was genuinely, well, I don't know how surprised he was in the first arc. He knew they were up to shady stuff, but yeah, I mean, pretty much trying to kill him in this one, and he like sticks with them. It's like, what?
It seems like this one played into Fireteam Elite as well with the synth design.
I mean, I know it said that in the press release. It was like,
did it not remind you of Alpha and Beta?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's Charlie, but that was the only real tie-in element, was just the combat synth, and that was it. So when
again, you have like, that Alpha, Beta, Charlie. That's felt like another one.
Yeah, it says for the press release, they said we had an opportunity to tie the films into one of my favorite games in recent memory, Aliens Fireteam Elite.
Yeah.
Since the moment I played that game, I wanted to see Gabe in his prime with his fellow soldiers, face to face with xenomorphs and combat synths. That's what readers and gamers will see in this annual, a chapter that belongs on the shelf alongside the films, but also alongside the beloved game that my fellow superfans have spent so many hours playing over the past year. It doesn't really tie into it. It's just Charlie. That's the only
just a
element.
Cameo, yeah.
And
I like that. I love seeing that design in another.
Yeah.
Or elements, something obviously inspired by that design in another piece of the lore.
So do we want to do quick thoughts, quick review for this as well?
We'll just crack on with that one. There's not terribly much to really.
Okay, I'm going to give it a score. I'm going to give this one a 4. I had the same issue that I had with Aftermath, in that it's too short. I feel like one-shots are the opportunity to kind of bridge that gap between a comic and a graphic novel, or even just go full graphic novel length, because it's a one-shot. Like, just, I don't know. I don't know if things just work differently with Marvel, but like it just seemed too short. And that was the same problem I had with
But
Aftermath. It seemed like right when it was ramping up, it's just over. And with this one, it
this
just
is
rushes
extended.
through.
It's extended, mate. This is bigger than a normal issue.
Well, it didn't feel like it. Like it felt super rushed and it like extended by 20 more pages or something. Like
This is like the short story argument that we had in the Ultimate Prey episode, where you were saying, you know, things like it felt like the start of a narrative. It's just the way these are done.
well, there's even a point like after this unexpected thing happens to their ship and they have to survive on their ship for a while. It's just it shows a couple panels. It's like 20 something days later, and I'm like, cool, that would have been interesting to see them surviving on that ship. Like,
But would it have if they just held up in the mess hall for 20 days?
I don't know. You could have at least done a couple scenes of some of them getting picked off,
Hmm.
but it just felt like it was so rushed. And yeah, I was kind of intrigued by the whole Fireteam Elite connection that they mentioned in the
Doesn't-
press release, and it just
Yeah.
felt like a cameo, like you were saying, Eric. It was like, okay, there's Charlie. He looks like the combat sense in the games, but I thought it was going to actually tie into some of the narrative elements of the games a little bit. But
I went into it completely forgetting that from the press release, so that wasn't even a blip on my radar. I was just like, "Oh, cool! That looks kind of like Alpha and Beta," and it didn't bother me because of that, I guess. I actually found it entertaining in what it did with Ash. Now, as I said on the post,
Ash on the Marion again, really?
as I said on the post in the forums, it's like I don't remember Out of the Shadows well enough to know how well they marry up. So it's probably just an alternate take on it, because Marvel doesn't really seem to be connecting with Titan. Really, it doesn't seem to be the case. So in that regard, it's kind of like doing what Aftermath did, where it's like, oh, we're going back and doing what we've done before because we've already revisited Ash returning, and Aftermath was we're going to go back to another Vasquez relative, which we've done before with Dark Horse. So it feels a little bit like treading over the familiar ground again, which is a bit of a disappointment. But for those who haven't maybe read Out of the Shadows and get a thrill from seeing, I know Eric probably hated it because of the depictions of the androids, but I liked seeing my crazy synths come back. So I actually got a little bit of kick out of Ash showing back up and the whole "you have my sympathies" panel. I normally hate reused dialogue, but because it was the same character and the same sort of vibe from that table head scene, I was like, this is entertaining. I like this. It's stupid, but I like this. I think
It's
that's
stupid, but I like that.
I think that's how I'd sum up this particular.
Yeah, I mean, I've
You
had
are
to say that
edging
before too. So
dangerously close to you criticizing Adam for liking Requiem and yet
that's what I was
disliking.
thinking.
I know
yeah.
I do seem to like these one shots, even though they
I
are
hate this
stupid.
stupid stuff, but I like this because it's stupid.
Well, I mean, it was the same for Aftermath. You know, as I read it through, I was like, "Oh, this is entertaining," and then it's like, "Yeah, but that was stupid." Well, why was that?
Why did I like that? Yeah. But it was, I will say, it was odd having Ash again brought back in another device on a ship called the Marion. I had to like do a double take for a second. I was like, wait a second, is the ship from that book coming into play here?
Was it the shuttle or was it the actual ship in it?
It was their ship they arrived in, was the
Oh.
Marion, which is the same
So
name
that-
as the ship from Out of the Shadows that Ash came back on the Narcissus computer.
Yes, it was.
Spoilers.
Yes.
But
Right. So I was going to say, was it
so
meant
I
to
was like,
be
wait a
the
second, what's going on?
Ash? Or is it
Yeah.
just another
No, not in this
AI
one. In this one, it's
called
not the
Ash?
Ash.
Yeah, so it's
Out of the
another one that's
Shadows-
just called Ash.
No, it's supposed to be the Ash.
Well, they mention it in their stupid mustache twirly business meeting in the beginning. They're like, "Oh, an old construct from." So I think it was like the
Yeah.
Ash mind that they had on file or whatever.
Oh,
But
that's
it's so
not the
silly.
read I had. That's not the read I had.
Like
I'm gonna see
where
what he
you
said.
get, it's like where you get, like in the same series, in fact, where you had a bishop model. It felt
Yeah.
like this was an Ash model with similar mannerisms,
Yeah,
but it wasn't the Ash. I don't know.
So
It
he
felt like it
says,
was-
do you have an operating system in mind? I do. One that has history with our
Mm.
bioweapon. I'm confident it has the company's interest at heart. and it won't balk at a few deaths for the greater
It's,
good. This is just in a business meeting, by the way.
it's that talk there that made me think it was the same one
I
because
know, right?
it's like the operating system equals consciousness.
But it's again,
no,
like
it's
there
like
were multiple
Windows.
Davids, there were multiple, just
Yeah.
like Eric was saying, there's multiple bishops, and
Like Windows 10, people have got different, but it's all Windows. That's the operating system.
But if they knew Ash was particularly dedicated to protecting the alien, they could just do a copy of Ash. You know,
I guess
I didn't
we'll
take
never know.
how
It's not the deadly synthetics you insert on a mission. It's the friends you make along the way.
Unless he somehow survived in the computer and the Narcissus, and they extracted him later and held on to him just for such a circumstance as this. But like,
I mean, that was just my takeaway from it. I'm surprised somebody hasn't asked him on Twitter yet, or maybe they have.
no,
But
no.
well, we'll have
This
a look
did-
post in the news article that goes up with this.
I will say this is distinguished as an Alien comic for having that twist in the tale where it seemed like both this Ash or the Ash, whichever it is, Ash and the alien still they survive at the end. The human character goes off, but they didn't destroy the alien. It's still there, and it's just
still just knocking about on the ship.
Orbital laboratory, as it were. Yeah, that's rare to find. Whether or not it worked, I mean, was it an anticlimax to see that, or were you expecting that's going to be dealt with as a situation? Or
I mean, end of the day, the hero got away. Survived to live another day. So I can't say it really got a blip out of me.
I also think the story didn't really run with its setup too well, because they talk about using the alien as a bioweapon against these extremist groups that are, again, anti-corporate extremist groups that were in the first arc, right? And
and in Aftermath as well.
Yeah. So I guess they've taken over the space station of Wailing Yutanis, and Wailing Yutani is going to use the organism on them. And again, those sorts of things always remind me of that old artwork that was part of the Replay Watch campaign that was like so cool. I just always think back to those. It's a really awesome concept. And so I was like, oh, cool. We're going to see them use the alien to, and again, like the business meeting thing was mustache twirly, but the idea itself was they're going to use the alien to cause an outbreak against a group they are against, they have issues with. And I was like, that's a cool concept. But then the station just fires missiles at the ship that arrives and disables it. And then the company just comes in and nukes the station. And I'm like, wait, you just like nuked your setup there of the aliens on this station. And now they're just surviving on this ship. And we skip past all that too. So it just seemed like it didn't really go anywhere with the intriguing setup that it had in the beginning.
But I mean, even that concept, I've often said on the forums, the alien does not make a good weapon. And if they're going to use it against rioters, like, firstly, rioters typically do something where there are cameras, where there's media attention, so you can't release it against them anyway. And secondly, if you just want to kill them all, just use a bomb, or just send in droids with guns, or gas them. It's not gonna.
The camera thing is a really good point, because it starts out with the footage from the riot.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, you're not going to use an alien in that. You're just going to use you might as well throw chainsaws at them. It's not going to do anything.
Eric's never been keen on the idea of the aliens for urban pacification, have you?
I think it can be done.
Because Ren was insane. I mean, he was literally insane. So not literally, but he was he wasn't a military strategist.
It
was beyond just him.
Coming up
the
with
company
crazy
wanted
ideas
it for the bioweapons division, and maybe that goes beyond just using the creature as a weapon. Yeah, aspects of the alien, and this was also delved into a bit, sometimes in silly ways, in the Wailing Yutani report. If you read that, of all the different applications for the alien.
Well, I mean, it's not like the older EU hasn't explored it a lot as well, but it always does tend to come down to them being foot soldiers, and it's why I kind of like
it's such
some of the other stories.
Lazy concept. Use like what is about the sensory apparatus of an alien. It's something that was able to figure out the precise location of the Marines from way over in the atmosphere processor. If you were able to figure out how the alien had that kind of sensory apparatus, that alone would be a huge patent. But just sending aliens themselves out, it's like someone with pulse rifles.
I think if done right, it can work well, and that's why I keep going back to that read, play, watch concept art that I was talking about, Aaron, is because that was that idea, but presented in a way where it looked genuinely terrifying and intriguing. And again, Resident Evil fan coming out and me here, like, you have the evil corporation, they want combat data with all these bioweapons they've developed, and it's kind of that parallel for me.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, when you are looking at it from the perspective of, doesn't matter if they'd be good or not in reality or whatever, but this is what they're doing. The idea of field testing it and getting data for that works for me. But the other possibilities of the other uses of the aliens is something that I do find interesting. I think it's something I talked about when we did the Infiltrator, the Fireteam prequel. Yeah, it was Infiltrator, wasn't it? You know, it was one. It was
with all their experiments. Yeah,
it was one of the missed opportunities, I thought, in that, where I was kind of like, oh, it's just acid-proof armor. That's so boring. But yeah, anyway, that's all besides the point.
So this one for me, I enjoyed less than Arc 2, because at least with Arc 2 we had some interesting bits of art and story, but this one I felt like it just kind of fell flat on its face. I liked Aftermath a bit more, even though I also had a problem with Aftermath that it had a really good setup and then just rushed through and didn't pay off that setup at the end.
Good art.
And good art. Yeah, that one had really good art.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Is this one you'd revisit?
No.
Okay.
Let's do better with Alien, Marvel, please.
What about you, Eric?
It had some nice individual things of like Ash doing a David 8 impression, basically. Like at the end of Covenant, what's he doing? He's essentially using the Covenant as his own private rat maze, and he's trying to test the alien out. It had some nice little spooky scenes with Ash doing that, and some of the dialogue as Ash carried on, I could kind of hear Ian Holmes say. Some of it I couldn't. But there was some, if you're a fan of Ash, I mean, there's some interesting stuff here. Didn't really care for it too much as a story. As a comic, it felt a bit generic, but it wasn't bad. It's like the other one. It's not a bad comic. It could have and should have been better. Especially in terms of the kind of horror situation. Like, you think yourself, this is essentially like a Nostromo situation. You are trapped somewhere with, well, it could be several aliens for all you know. What are you gonna do with that? Like, that is a sandbox. That is a little toolbox for a writer. Do some disturbing shit. Give me terror. You don't quite get that here, but if you're a fan of that kind of like, what would Ash have done, like when he's cornering Ripley and the kind of things that David 8 does, I think this is that kind of story for you, if that's what you're into. But that's not really what I'm into. I think they could have and should have done better, but I didn't hate it. It was an okay average comic, but as Adam says, do better, Marvel, please, because you're given this amazing you're given this amazing franchise. Look back into the heritage you are given. You need to do. You can do better than Dark Horse. Give us that, but we're kind of being given these
sacrilege.
Dark Horse came to some good stuff, but it also gave some.
They also had their stinkers too, but they had some
rescue.
We could have some really good stuff, but it just felt a little generic. I want these stuffs to be like Sacrifice, where I want, even if it's not a mindfuck, I want it to be something where I'll go, wow, that made me think, or what would I do in that situation? Or, oh, that character did that. Things like that. And this felt kind of A to B. Once the reveal of Ash has hit, it's like it's blown its load. And
Does
then
it lose
so
the
long as
momentum
you're
for you?
so long as you're interested in that kind of vibe that Ash had with Ripley and David had with what was her name in Covenant?
Sure.
Daniels.
Okay.
That kind of thing, without the sexual subtext, obviously. I think it'll do it for you, but
See,
to me, it
that's
just
probably
felt-
why I got a lot of enjoyment out of this one.
yeah.
Because
See,
I
I
didn't like
already-
that vibe.
I already
And
had
yet-
that revisitation in Out of the Shadows, so it just kind of felt redundant for me at this point.
And see, that was the
Yeah,
other
but
thing.
it wasn't
They
it wasn't
had-
the same vibe in Out of the Shadows. I don't think, anyway.
But this is one of the reasons I didn't like Out of the Shadows, because I was thinking, wow, this is Ash. You can do some really full-on stuff with Ash. This one also, I felt like it squandered the opportunity to do something with Ash. I think they could have just made it an original synthetic character. They could have even just said it's David 8. They could have brought back a David 8 AI. It would have been fine. It felt like they didn't capitalize on what Ash is capable of,
I mean,
personality-wise, and it's like it was a cameo name check.
Yeah,
But
that's fair. I mean, I think ultimately you only really get what 2, 3, 4 pages maybe worth of actual Ash in the story.
yeah.
So I completely see what you're saying.
It didn't go that extra mile it could have done.
Yeah.
So it's like interesting, but could have
not quite there, which I think is the vibe we're all feeling with Marvel's handling of Alien. It's got to the point where when a new issue of a Dark Horse comic came out, I would go and get it from the shop straight away. Yeah, I would be legitimately excited to go to that comic shop, maybe even leave work a couple, 15 minutes early, so I'd get there in time before the shop closed and pick it up, and I would be excited for it. I'm not rushing to get these comics at the minute.
You got jaded like me.
I mean, I'm still excited for the Titan books. I'm still excited to see that copy turn up in the post. But that's just not how I'm feeling with, and this is with the tragedy that was Colony Wars, as far as I'm concerned. I'm still excited. I was still excited to get Inferno Has Fallen. I was still excited to get Eyes of the Demons. That excitement's there for that, but not with the Marvel stuff at the minute.
But again, it's not bad though. You didn't hate it. You just thought,
yeah, but that's isn't that worse?
It's painfully average to sub-average. Like
that ambivalence. That it was okay.
It was a
probably
fun little comic, but that's all.
Yeah, but if it's not
it
a
feel like it
listing,
lived up to what it should be.
I think I'd rather more passionately hate it, like I did Hanukkah in Infiltrator or Colony War, than just not care. I don't know. Maybe it's just me being weird, but
well, I'm just trying to revert because we had that nice sort of kind of like it wasn't optimism, but we felt like we were up there on the last episode, and you hate being when you say negative.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I don't want to feel negative about this.
This isn't negative. This is low energy ambivalence, is what this one is. Which is a shame, but I'm really fucking looking forward to this weekend.
Oh yeah, I was telling you, and I was like, we need a good negative podcast after how good I felt about Prey.
So you cursed it, you jinxed it.
So I don't know if I'm getting invited to any Marvel after parties, but
this was always going to be this kind of episode. I don't think it was ever going to be anything different, which is another reason why I wanted something joyous last episode. Basically,
I think basically it's fair to say if you have been enjoying the Marvel comics so far, you will continue to enjoy this. If they haven't done it for you so far, it's still on the rails.
It's more of the same.
It's more of the same. So if you liked them, you'll like this. If unfortunately we didn't love them, so we are going to be honest and say didn't do it for us. But I think if you like them, you'll like these. It's pretty much more of the same, as you said.
And the covers are great. The best part of the comic for me, again, same with the first arc.
Yep.
Just the standard covers and the variant covers, awesome. You're killing it there, Marvel. Like that part's good.
But anyway, next episode I'm really looking forward to. I'm so looking forward to talking Prey. I'm so looking forward to some of the interviews we have booked in to do with Prey. I'm going to have so much fun over the next couple of months. And then
August and September are going to be good for that.
And we'll have Inferno's Fall to talk about. We'll have Eyes of the Demon to talk about. It's going to be fun. I'm going to enjoy the next couple of months. I'm really looking forward to it. But I don't really want to talk Marvel anymore. Are you guys done?
Well, when Marvel Predator launches, we're going to have to... When is that coming, by the way? Isn't that
No.
finally this month?
Yes, but we'll not
I mean,
talk about it
we'll
until it's
wait to the
finished.
completion of the arc, right? But hopefully that doesn't have the problems that Alien has had.
Well, we'll see. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Be sure to head on over to the homepage avpgalaxy.net if you're interested enough to put the effort in to come and sign an account and talk with us on the boards. Please do. Eric knocking the microphone there. Yeah, please do come in and join with us. Talk about Prey with us. Talk about, even the thread. I went back and I reread the thread for this today because I was like, when did I cotton on to the illness thing? And I was like, the bulk of the discussion in the thread is just about LaRocca. There's like no interest in the narrative going off here.
It's a distraction. And that's why I'm still interested to see what Philip Kennedy Johnson can do with artwork that is not a distraction,
And if you are discussing this on the forum, I know the temptation for people who didn't like it is to lay into the artwork, but maybe try and spark some discussions of how you feel, like what would you have done story-wise to improve it with the same elements. Do constructive criticism, because there's not enough of that. A lot of forums can get bitchy and that. Think about how would you have improved it? How would you have done it?
But yeah, I mean, people don't seem massively interested in the narrative. Is more my point at the minute. It doesn't elicit the same issue by issue discussion that used to go into, things like Dust to Dust and Defiance and stuff like that. But whatever. So come and join in with us. There's plenty more discussions on there, and if you care enough to sign up, we're interested to talk to you. We're also on social media: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Obviously YouTube as well, if this is where you're experiencing the podcast. If you're not, then we're on Twitter. We're on YouTube as AVP Galaxy or Alien versus Predator Galaxy versus as in VS.
We're not on Tumblr, are we?
God, no. I think
Tumblr's not cool anymore.
Once upon a time, I do think I made an AVP Galaxy page on Tumblr, but I think it got deleted very fast. We're talking 10 years ago.
Collector's edition.
If you want to follow me personally, I'm at _Corporal Hicks on Twitter.
If you'd like to follow me personally, it's at RidgeTop21 on both Instagram and Twitter.
And Eric,
don't follow me.
Get on that social media, Eric. You know what we need? We need an AVP Galaxy TikTok.
No,
that's gonna be horrible.
Adam,
share some of that CCP spyware in there.
Shut fuck up. Anyway. This has been episode 149. I'm looking forward to 150. Thank you, everybody, for listening or watching. This has been Corporal Hicks.
RidgeTop.
Xenomorphine.
Signing off.